So what do you do when you see an absolute blowout earnings report? You come in the next day and the stock does nothing but go straight down all day long. It's a great opportunity today, guys, with earnings out today to have a look at how we can fade a positive earnings report. So we're talking about a fade trade today, in that when a company comes out with an absolute monster report and then you see the stock just go straight down all day, what on earth do you do?
Yeah, so and this is in response to a couple of things, and one of them, AMD, right? Like we saw what happened with AMD today. There's nothing, you're not going to point to anything that's negative about the report. You can talk about their valuation still being a little bit rich, but sometimes it's about where it's come from. Now, AMD, in 3 sessions, you're going to talk about a move from 100 up to 130. So that's a pretty significant move for something as big as an advanced micro devices here. And I think that's where the fade play does come into play, because you can get that bit of a retracement. Now, obviously, in your long term, this is a bit different than finding an actual trade. And I'm sure we can talk about the ways that you want to dip in and when you might want to do that for the long. But what you got to consider here, and what I was trying to do this morning and missed, and that's the key thing I missed, and I learned something from this, is if you really like a setup, and it's the biggest name out there in terms of volatility. PayPal was one today. AMD was certainly another one that we had an opportunity on. You want to be able to take 2 shots. So when you have that gap up, there's such a monstrous gap to fill on this 15-minute chart, all the way back into something like a 117 in theory, or shallow back into like a 125. When the gap is that big, you might want to have 2 shots at it. And always look for a setup that you trust. Now, there's 2 ways that I think should have played this. I only looked for one. One of them can simply be that first trade off of 930. Now, I love a pop and short off of a high of the day on a gap up, and that's just a standard play with a small cap. It tries to run into the high, the pre-market highs, then it rolls over. But sometimes you just simply have to be willing to say, if it breaks down, there will be profit takers because it's up 30% in just 3 sessions, and you want to be a part of that. And that means you want to find the first level. And that's just where it was, like right at 9 o'clock, it made a recent high at 130.65. If it tests that level at the open, you get in right there, right then. And if it breaks the top, you're willing to take another shot at this at the high of the day. That requires conviction that there's going to be profit taking in the name, and also accepting the fact that if you're wrong, remember, the fundamentals were good and it was a blowout. So if it gets going and breaks out, you've got to stick to your route. That's the other thing. You're going to be going against the gap up and the positive news. So you want to make sure if you are fading it, that you have yourself an out. So identifying that in the pre-market while it's still holding support, that's what you have to do. You can't wait till 9:30 to come up with a plan. You've got to know where you want to offer and what you want to look for, as it's consolidating going into that open. Because once it starts falling in that situation, stops to start triggering, people are taking profits that have swung it from the last couple of days, and the other shorts and the algos are piling into it, and it's too late.
So the topic, and I just got it clarified here, trading and earnings surprise, the fade trade. So fade is generally going down, but you just killed it. So I'm going to go the other way quickly with PayPal. And that's just an earnings surprise. I mean, honestly, I don't think any of us, we're not surprised that it's negative, but I think on the same side, we're just surprised at the amount that we're down here on PayPal. I mean, a huge company, 200 billion plus, I don't know what it is now, market cap on this day, probably still 300 billion on this name, and it's just a monster disappointment to the downside. So you're like, oh, I'm holding this. What do I do? Do I average in? Like what am I gonna do with this? And honestly, when you see something like this, I believe if it's a name that you like, and like we just talked about, what are the future guidance looking like? Sometimes you have to sort of yourself project, is PayPal dead? What are they guiding for in the future? What are their competition saying? Did Square come out today and say something? Did Affirm come out today and say something? So you got to sort of see some of the analysts also that work with PayPal. Sometimes there's reports called kitchen sink, and what that means is that they're purposely sort of downplaying how negative maybe their next quarter is going to be, because they don't want the analysts to say, oh, you missed again. So they'll guide a little bit lower. So what I was going to say about PayPal, that happened today on PayPal, and if I could zoom in just a little bit here to show you, what you're trying to wait out for is it to make clear bottoms, right? Like, I think that to take this bottom first, early, this is the market open, comes all the way down to 129. Sure, it's a great bottom. I think Neil will even have this. 130 all the way up to 135. That's fantastic, but you don't know if that's the bottom. But then, as you can see, it kind of it retested here at 11, then it retested again at noon. We just retested again at 1. So, you know, every sort of hour, hour and a half here, we're retesting these bottoms. And to me, how do you trade an earnings surprise? Wait for confirmation on some of these bottoms. And it looks like you might have got one now for PayPal. So if you're day trading, you definitely would have taken this a couple more times like Neil was showing on the trade of the day. I think that's very opportunistic. And that's, in my opinion, how you catch a falling sword on an earnings surprise. Wait for a couple confirmations on a bottom.
And if you are coming into trading whatever day and you simply look at a report and see blowout numbers right across the board, understand that doesn't mean you close your eyes and go long. So a great look there, guys, at a couple of ideas on how to trade earnings when they blow out, but then the stock just goes straight to the downside.